for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind, and now I think it's time you get the whole story. I'm Jesse Ventura, and this is Quinnspiracy Theory.
It has now been 2 weeks since the Zoe Post blog first went up online, and in the span of 14 days, a lot of things have happened. One of the most striking of which would be the pushback on the part of gamers. It is a pushback against a corrupt gaming press, and believe me when I say they are corrupt, that is exactly what they are. When this first started coming to light, they originally tried silence. They simply sought to ignore it, and hoped that it went away. But it didn't. When that failed, they moved on to censorship which we can show, which evidence exists of, and yet that did not work. It just spread it even further, thanks to the Streisand effect. When censorship failed, they moved on to what they're doing now, which is mockery and attacking. And it will fail just like the past two attempts did. What they are not taking into account is people have had enough. And a prime example of that is the fact that we're even still talking about this. That we are on day 14 with a fucking hashtag Gamergate. That we are on day 14 with people in the movie industry, the television industry, the fucking music industry commenting on this. We are on day 14 where websites have some of the largest threads in their fucking history dedicated to this very thing. It is not going away, it is not diminishing, and it is not dying. And that speaks volumes to what is happening, because the internet is a place where things happen in quick succession. You are lucky if you can keep the internet's attention for a day, let alone 2 entire weeks. And yet, still, the gaming media, the gaming press, these supposed so-called journalists, are trying to act as if there's nothing here, that there's no corruption, that nothing needs to be addressed, or that anything that has been addressed as a result of the sustained pressure is not a big deal. That it's really not as big as you think. There's no conspiracy, there's no collusion. You're all just deluding yourselves and thinking that things are taking place and they're not really happening. But we, the game journalists, we have your best interest in mind, so just shut the fuck up and we'll tell you what to think. Now, it's been hard to keep track of all this because so much shit has come to light. So many different pieces of evidence and links and connections between different individuals, because I'll say this right out front. I think perhaps the biggest fault, outside of the blatant fucking corruption, would be the arrogance of these people. The gaming journalists that exist are some of the most smug, arrogant fucking people you will ever meet. But that works to our benefit. They think they can't be held accountable. They think that their faults and failures don't need to be addressed, and they are arrogant and defiant in their behavior. And because of that, they have dragged their asses across social media to such an extent that massive amounts of connections and evidence just sits there. Now, because of the scope of things that have taken place, I want to scale it back. I want to ask a simple question. Before all of this happened, who would you have listed if I'd said, name me a reputable game journalist or a website that you trust? Well, I think most people would have answered Forbes, and I think most people would have said Eric Kane. He's somebody who people looked up to. He's somebody that we held as an example of somebody who we thought had our best interest in mind, even if we disagreed with him, because we had seen his ethical standards and practice. Now, Forbes, and the people I'm going to be talking about, have not in any way been connected to any of this. None of their names have been brought up. None of them have ever been shown to have been in collusion with anybody else. It's just a site with 2 guys talking about this. But I think it speaks to an issue of the disconnect between them and us, between the gaming media and the actual consumer. Now, the first article we're going to look at is by Paul Tassi. It's called The Truth About Video Game Journalism, and it was published on August 22nd, so roughly a week from when the blog post first went up. Now, in his article, he mentions that there's a scandal going on, but he's not going to mention anybody by name. He then further goes on to explain that this isn't really an issue, that games journalism is fairly mundane, that they're not going to jump on a dog pile to slander an innocent woman, and that he feels uncomfortable calling himself a gamer now because of the toxic mentality of these people, of gamers that are curious about this, that want this to be addressed, because the bias is on our part and not the gaming press's part. It's our fault, not theirs. And while this article tries to come off as neutral and objective, it's quite clear it's not. Now, Tassi, as I said, he doesn't address any of the concerns. Instead, he says that she's innocent, and that's how he addresses it. He doesn't look into any of the evidence or any of the allegations. He doesn't want to jump on that dog pile. Now, you could look at this and say, all right, well, maybe that's his opinion. But then look what he writes on Twitter directly after publishing this. This is from August 23rd, from Paul Tassi on his Twitter account. All this, but doesn't this raise questions talk, reminds me of people being mad at the media for failing to prove Obama is a Muslim. If I had to guess, I'd say there's some overlap in those crowds. Now, that's ironic coming from Paul Tassi because in his article he states, ideally, we'd like to do so without being insulted. He doesn't want to be insulted as a gaming journalist. He's just trying to do his job. Even though he's going to spin a narrative that anybody questioning this is toxic, and that the woman in question, who he won't name, is innocent and being dogpiled on by horrible individuals. Apparently those that think Obama is a Muslim. So it really throws the objective nature of his article out the fucking window. That's not really journalism. There's no investigation taking place. You're not addressing anything. You're just putting up a smokescreen. It's an article that doesn't talk about anything. But it's not Paul Tassi we're interested in, is it? It's Eric Kane. That's the guy we look to. That's the guy that's held up as the example, as the fucking example of what game journalism should be. He's the guy we trust. So let's take a look at his article. It was Sex, Lies, and Video Games, and it was published on August 26th, so it's 4 days after Tassi's was put up. Now, while Kane's article does go slightly farther than Tassi's did, again, it's another non-piece. There's no real investigation taking place. It says there was a scandal. It mentions some partial details, but that's about it. And instead, it veers off. It veers off to talk about something he says echoes Jim Sterling's earlier statements about how journalists have a tough job and maybe it's hard to keep relationships separated, but let's not go into any specific detail. He even outright states in his third paragraph, let's gloss over the details. Then going on to further state, I've done the research. I've followed the various threads on the various forums, listened to the YouTube videos, seen all those little immigrant sleuth pics. And while a deeper look at the nature of the media industry relationship is warranted, this affair only serves as a leaping off point, not as a story itself. That is a sentiment we've heard echoed repeatedly since this began. They will not talk about this. They refuse to talk about this. And again, this is a publication that's not connected to it. And yet it presents an image of a gaming press that will not keep its house in order. It won't talk about the objective failures of other game journalists. They won't do that. You can't talk about that. That's not acceptable. It's ironic that his article's talking about the closeness of relationships when it demonstrates the thing he's talking about by refusing to address the allegations made in relation to the scandal. And that is what it is. We're talking about a scandal related to relationships between indie developers, Zoe Quinn, and people in the gaming press. It was the catalyst for what has set everything else off. You could no more remove Zoe Quinn from corruption in game journalism than you could remove Richard Nixon and Watergate from corruption in politics. It is the focal point, it is the starting point, it is the catalyst. By refusing to address it, you're hand-waving us off. Now, one of the things I find concerning about this is that very statement, I've done the research. What does that mean? What do you mean you've done the research? You're a journalist. If you're a journalist, this is my understanding of what a journalist does. They investigate. They do interviews. They make phone calls. They look into possible connections, financially or otherwise. They actually get out and do the legwork. Watching YouTube videos and reading forum threads is not journalism. That's what bloggers do. That's what I do. That's what everybody on the fucking internet does. Journalists take it a step further by investigating and looking into the allegations, possible statements or connections. They do the legwork. So I find it disconcerting that that's your research and that then you go off and to talk about these vague things without addressing the specifics. Again, just like Tassi did. Now, later on in the article, you state, under this whole social justice warrior thing is a mess, just a complete mess. A fairly substantial set of gamers is absolutely obsessed with the so-called SJW, the White Knights of Games Media. And you talk about how you don't really understand that. You don't understand what an SJW is, and you're questioning, are you one? Because you believe in ideas of equality. Now, I find this supremely fucking funny because of something Eric Kane posted on his Twitter. This is from August 28th. I'm saying Divinity Original Sin is best game of the summer. What's yours? Putting aside the differences we may have in what a journalist does in regards to actual research before they publish an article, you stated, I've looked at the pics, I've followed the links, I've watched the videos. Yeah, and you don't understand the whole SJW thing. Then you go on Twitter. And you say your favorite fucking game of the summer is Divinity Original Sin. Here's a fun fact. If you go back and look at that first video I put up, you might have noticed this blog post talking about hypersensitive journalists, white knights, and social justice. In fact, this particular person talks about how it interferes with their ability to do their fucking job as a creator. Do you know what game they worked on? Divinity Original Sin. Your favorite game of the summer. You don't understand social justice warriors. You don't understand how this entire thing that's been going on for 2 weeks is important, and you want to hand wave it off, but you've done the research, you've looked at the videos, and yet the videos, mine and others, cite this as a fucking source, and then you go onto Twitter and talk about this very game when somebody who helped create it is telling you these people are fucking with their career. But that's not newsworthy. Now, if you'd done the legwork, if you had contacted them and maybe set up an interview, you'd have a better fucking idea for what people are talking about when they say agenda pushing, when they talk about social justice warriors, and when they talk about the impact that has on not only the consumer, but the developer of games. It is just frustratingly disappointing that the people who are perceived to be the better of game journalism fall into the same fucking pitfalls of refusing to look into things when people bring them up and circling the fucking wagons because you don't want to fling shit at your other fellow professionals, do you? That's what it feels like. So when you have all these different gaming sites putting media blackouts in place, refusing to talk about shit, and covering each other's backs, why do you think there's a notion of conspiracy? Well, how do you think that makes you look, Eric? How do you think that makes your profession look? Go check out the fucking, hashtag Gamergate. Maybe go do some more research, read some fucking tweets or something. Hell, at this point, I may as well become a contributor at Forbes. Why not fill out an application? Because obviously, the bar has been set really, really low. Why not? Why don't I get a job as a journalist there? And I'll read some fucking tweets and then whip up an article about it. Because that's apparently what research is nowadays. But you might be saying, wait a minute, Jim. You're a giant asshole. There's no way you could be a journalist. Well, I beg to differ. Let's take a look at some of these journalists and what they've been writing recently. Oh, here's one. Somebody asked, what does gamer even mean to you? And the response from somebody who's written articles for Polygon and other sites, shit person who cares way too much about video games. That's great. Good idea to insult the demographic. When I think Polygon from now on, I'm going to think people who think I'm an asshole and don't like people who play video games. Oh, here's another classy game journalist. My Twitter is full of wound-up nerds proving my point all day. I love that as somebody who plays video games. To have the people who purport and claim to be fans of gaming and who want to write about gaming and work in the industry insult me. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Nerds, geeks, shit people. That's a really smart decision, and it doesn't make you all look like a bunch of bullying assholes. They may be saying, but again, Jim, you're a giant dick. That's true, but I'm not going around claiming I'm a fucking journalist, am I? You don't see my name slapped up on Kotaku. I didn't go get a master's degree in journalism, did I? But these people want to play pretend. They want to write on video game websites and pretend to be game journalists, and then go and behave in abhorrent ways. Now, maybe they're just a little bit salty because, somebody, don't want to name drop them because they've been really pissy at them lately, tore them a new asshole so fucking large that you could drive a semi-truck through it. And they are very angry about that because it's not somebody they can just push around. It's somebody bigger than they are. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that somebody in a position of power wants to take a shit on them like, they're taking a shit on us. But no, I really do think, I think I'm going to become a game journalist. I'll even come up with my own agenda because agendas are okay now. Maybe you all haven't heard of this yet, but having an agenda and being a journalist are not mutually exclusive things anymore. It's totally okay. Take this article, for example. Announcement readers who feel threatened by equality no longer welcome. Now, maybe you've never heard of this website, but it's apparently big in Australia. As they claim, we've also built one of Australia's most popular gaming news and review sites. And that funny little line under that, most experienced journalists. Well, let's see what kind of statements they make. As long as I am in charge of this ship, I will happily admit to pushing an agenda. Oh, and comments are closed on this article. That's another common theme among all these very brave journalists who like to go on Twitter and mock gamers. They'll immediately block them, and then they'll publish articles mocking them and close the comments because they are such brave professionals who are so open to honest feedback that they run away like cowards. Which makes you wonder, is there any redeemable quality to these people, to their profession, to these websites. Over the past 2 weeks, we've uncovered a treasure trove of things they didn't want to talk about. And throughout the course of it all, they kept telling us there's nothing to discuss, there's nothing to address. Take Polygon, for instance. Here's a statement they released this past week about Patreon support. Patreon, again, is a service that's like a monthly stipend. You're not creating a product, you're just getting paid to exist. That's what Patreon is. Think of it like the Kickstarter for people, except they never start anything. They just sort of lazily lay about because you're fucking paying the rent. Why would they get off their ass? So here's Polygon saying that they see no issue with their reporters financially supporting people. So think the likes of Kohler or Kuchera, that's okay. We can't see any foreseeable bias that might emerge from you investing in people in an industry you report on. This is like black magic to them. They don't get it. It's hoodoo. It's all mystical and shit. But then again, this is Polygon we're talking about. It's not like they have ethics in the first place. I mean, after all, these are the people that allowed somebody to review a game who had a relationship with the developer. That's a real class act, Polygon. You're really lighting the fucking way to the future of journalism with your ethics and behavior these past 2 weeks. Now, Polygon wasn't the only one to release a statement. Kotaku did as well. Editor-in-chief Stephen Totilo released a statement about Patreon as well. His was different. He said they did find that there were conflicts of interest with people who report on an industry donating to people in that industry. So that will no longer happen to Kotaku. Now you might say, isn't that great? Look, here's Stephen Totilo taking a stand. And in fact, didn't he also address that Nathan Grayson thing? I mean, it seems like Stephen is actually stepping up to the fucking plate. Yes, it seems like that. I'll grant you that. It seems like that. If you go back a little bit, you'll remember his statement. This is a part of it that he put up on Twitter before he had a chance to actually write something for Kotaku itself, talking about Grayson. My standard has long been this. Reporters who are in any way close to the people they might report on should recuse themselves from reporting about those with whom they're close. If they must report about them, disclosure is mandatory. Readers deserve that. Well, that sounds really good. I mean, that's a position we as gamers should be able to agree with. If you know somebody, you have a relationship with somebody, whatever it is, whether it's a friendship, a very close friendship, or a sexual or romantic relationship, or financial ties, you should recuse yourself from writing about them because it creates a conflict of interest. And I mean, here he is making all these public statements, so obviously he genuinely cares about this. Except for the fact that Kotaku has tried to very quietly smooth over some rough edges without making too public of a statement. Now, what would that rough edge be? Well, none other than Patricia Hernandez. Buckle in for this one because it's really going to be great. Hopefully Eric Kane's still watching. I really think you should pay attention to this next little bit. It might be educational for him. Now, Patricia Hernandez had a couple of interesting Twitter conversations that got people looking through some things. Here's one she had with Christina Love. Patricia writes, "The neck region is kind of one of the best regions, period." Christina responds, "Gosh, I had no idea you felt that way." To which Patricia responds once more, "How are you supposed to play that off when you've dated me? Ah ha 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 ha." And just who is Christina? Why, she would be a game developer. A game developer Patricia Hernandez wrote about. She did more than just write about her. This isn't a little positive press. She recommended you buy the games and put links into the article directing you to the fucking store page. Oh, but it doesn't end there. No, one conflict of interest, that would just be amateur shit. Let's bump it up a little bit. Let's bring in some friends too. How about Anna Anthropy? You know, another person Patricia personally knows, has a relationship of sorts with, maybe lived with, as you can see in this conversation that took place again on Twitter. And what do you know, Patricia wrote articles about her as well, giving her positive press and talking about her games and how interesting and insightful Anna Anthropy is. I also like those little updates on the articles, that address this. Oh, by the way, I know this article's fucking a year and a half old, but kind of had a relationship. Hopefully if anybody stumbles on this in an archive somewhere, they'll be alright with that. But they sure as shit didn't know at the time, did they, Patricia? So it comes off as slightly fucking disingenuous, Stephen, when you'll make public statements when you're pressured to and address ethical problems when you're pressured to. But when you think you can kind of slip by it, you do something like this. You put a little addendum on there and you don't address it in a upfront fucking public way. Which really begs the fucking question, what is it exactly that's going on here? Is it that Stephen Totilo doesn't know what his reporters are doing? Is he incompetent and oblivious to their ethical violations that are happening seemingly all over the fucking place? Whether it's financially, sexually, relationship-wise, press-wise? Or is he totally aware that these things are going on, but doesn't see a problem with them unless people pressure him about that? Because he's only responded to all of this shit ever since that blog post went up. So when I see other reporters saying that this is a non-fucking issue and a non-story and Gamergate isn't a thing and we don't need to talk about Zoe and all that related shit, I don't believe it. Hell, just in Kotaku alone we have multiple examples of ethical breaches. And time again we're met with the most bizarre of responses, which makes me, like I said, wonder what exactly is going on. Are you unaware that your reporters are out of fucking control? That they're having sex with people in relationships and reporting positive press in their favor? They're linking to their store pages and promoting their products? Were you unaware they're financially donating to people in an industry they cover? Are you covering it up? Are you only responding because there's criticism against you? Do you genuinely believe in ethical standards for a reporter, for journalism? What exactly is going on at fucking Kotaku? What is going on at Gawker Media? Now, hopefully Eric Kane did listen to this portion because it leads me to this point. By being sloppy about how you investigate things, this is what comes about. And believe me, Steven has been led down this road. Here's a statement from him 2 years ago in the comments of a Week in Kotaku article. This is regarding Robert Florence and corruption in gaming. Look at what he wrote in response to that. I don't think it's an important story, but that would take actual reporting to find out, and I just don't care enough about the latest supposed media scandal to ask my reporters to look into it. How pervasive is this attitude in your industry? No wonder none of you want to look at Zoe Quinn. It's not just that you have connections to her. It's not just that you're corrupt. You're fucking lazy. You don't want to be bothered to do the work. That requires effort, and who wants to do effort? You're just glorified bloggers. And apparently, people in the industry see right through you. They know exactly what you're up to. They know exactly how you operate. And they're just not going to be bothered with your bullshit. But now it's the customer. Now it's the reader. Now it's the consumer that's come around to that. Now, when the Zoe Quinn story first broke out, when this entire shitstorm first erupted, we were constantly told it was of no interest. They didn't care that she had been in relationships with people in gaming journalism, and this has been confirmed by Stephen Totilo himself after interviewing Nathan Grayson. This is his own statement, that yes, we did have a relationship, but the timeline doesn't line up. That's something that Eric Kane said in his article, and other people have speculated on and stated, and yet there's evidence that's floating out there that shows that's actually not correct, that they've had conversations about taking trips together, that the Las Vegas trip itself skews the timeline, and that there's more going on to it, but you don't want to investigate that because that's reporting and that takes work. Just like I'm sure you guys didn't care about the fine young capitalists getting their shit kicked in by Zoe Quinn, having evidence of this taking place. You don't care about that. Who cares? It's just somebody trying to support women in game development. You don't care about women in game development. You care about putting on a false face to make a profit. You clickbaiting cowards. I mean, my God, right now, at this very moment, there's a plethora of connections and information relating to this entire thing. Here's a tweet to Zoe Quinn back in February. We exploded their site, oh my god us. To which Zoe Quinn responds, oops, we DDoSed something by accident. Now, if you look at the entire conversation, it's them talking about harassing the fine young capitalists, it's them talking about going after the fine young capitalists, and throwing out criticisms that are frankly untrue and have been proven to be untrue. Now, who exactly is that that's making that tweet to Zoe? That's kind of interesting. I wonder, do they have any connection to any of this? Why, that account, that Twitter account, is owned by Maya Kramer. Well, who is Maya Kramer? Well, Maya Kramer would be in PR. More specifically, Maya Kramer happens to have connections. She works for Silver String Media. And guess who happens to be an advisor on Silver String Media? Anita Sarkeesian. Well, what a fucking coincidence. But hey, that's not the only coincidence. You remember that Indie Arcade Award that Zoe got on Depression Quest, and the people that are responsible for selecting the games that get chosen for awards? The people involved with that organization? It wasn't just Robin Arnott, it was also Maya Kramer. Correct, she's involved in that too. You know, speaking of Anita Sarkeesian, what has she been up to? Well, that's an interesting tweet. Video games, misogyny, and terrorism, a guide to assholes at badassdigest.com. Well, let's go take a look at that article. Well, that looks like a wonderful article about good, positive gamer culture. I'm sure it's not spinning a narrative at all. But Badass Digest, why does that sound so familiar? Wait a minute, do I know who's the editor? No, I'm sorry, the badass-in-chief at Badass Digest? Oh, that would be Devin Ferrasi. You know, the guy who doxes women on his Twitter account. Don't worry about it though, Anita. It's not like you're a feminist or anything. And besides, he has excuses. It's just this stupid fucking woman. He doesn't care. He'll put her information out there, doxing women on Twitter, giving them harassment. He's got justifications. Oh, who cares? It's a temporary email account. What's going to happen? It's not like they'd get threatened or harassed. But Devin Faraci, why does that? It still sounds familiar. What else do I know him from? Oh, he was the guy that was making jokes saying that he respects ISIS more than the people who are against Zoe Quinn. Now, wasn't ISIS the terrorist organization that kills real journalists? I'm stunned. Why would Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist, be linking to a website run by a man who doxes women and supports terrorism? That's fucking crazy. That's almost as bad as being an advisor at a PR firm that has relations to a person that destroys game jams dedicated to women. Now, Mr. Faraci here likes to compare people that are interested in Gamergate to ISIS, as in saying that we have a jihad against them, that this is some holy crusade. Well, he would be wrong. It's not a jihad, it's not a crusade, it's not even a revolution. It's a reformation. We are walking up to your front fucking door, and we are nailing our edict on it. Because we have seen what you've been doing to the thing we consider holy. You've been shitting it up with your corruption and your close relationships and your financial ties and spinning narratives that basically desecrates the thing we love. And when I say something like spinning narratives, that's exactly what I mean. See, ever since this Gamergate thing broke and people started calling out all these websites on the shady, underhanded shit they've been engaged in, that's been verified by people at these websites, whether they've excused it or admitted to it, we suddenly got this. A barrage that took place between the 28th and the 29th of article after article after article, one after the other, non-fucking stop, all saying the same thing. The gamer identity is dead. Gamers are horrible people. Gamers are terrible. They're misogynistic. They're sexist. We need to get rid of them. Well, excuse me for being a bit fucking incredulous here, but when I see 10 fucking articles all drop on the same day saying the exact same fucking thing, it almost feels like, I don't know, a PR company might be involved. Like these independent journalistic websites aren't really independent at all. Like maybe they're colluding with one another to put forward a narrative, a message, a talking point, or an agenda that they want to shove down the throat of the consumer. It almost seems like a hissy fit, like tantruming children that are upset that they've been dragged into the fucking daylight where they get exposed. And hell, this video has gotten so long, I've talked about so much of this shit at this point, because there's so many fucking examples of it, that I can't even get back to the Max Temkin thing. Yeah, that's right, apparently Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend posted more information in relation to Max Temkin's rape apology that he posted online. Apparently, guess who wrote that for him? Zoe Quinn. And why did she write it for him? Because he was going to financially support her game jam, and she didn't want bad PR, so she wanted to craft a message she thought would appeal to people. Are you fucking kidding me with this shit? Does it ever end? Is there a bottom? Have we reached it yet? I can't tell anymore. I want to drop a fucking nickel and listen to how long it takes before it starts bouncing off something. For the past 2 weeks now, we've been repeatedly told that this is a non-story and that nobody's interested, and yet all the information we have says otherwise. Site after site has repeatedly talked about it. Some of the biggest threads that have ever appeared on forums are about this very thing. Websites that are repositories for information have been accessed hundreds of thousands of times, Google searches 500,000 fucking times. It gets bigger and bigger by the day. If you think attacking us and trying to spin this on us is going to work, you are sadly mistaken. And I think perhaps the craziest thing about this all is that somebody needs to get a hold of Jeff Keighley and tell him to say thank you to Kotaku and Polygon and Rock Paper Shotgun and all of the others, because they've made him look good. Guess whose name hasn't been connected to any of this shit? Jeff Keighley. Guess what website hasn't been connected to any of this shit? IGN. He may be the fucking Dorito Pope, but at least he's clean in my eyes. Because after all, popes are celibate, and that's how I know he sure as shit ain't one of the 5 guys.